Hi everyone, my name is Richard Young, the creator of this cartoon. I'm not trying to adhere to any particular political ideology, though I must admit I'm probably a little bit right of center in my thinking. With artificial intelligence providing the artistic talent, something I lack, I've been able to put my thoughts and ideas into these political cartoons. Today's cartoon depicts President Trump as Alexander the Great, cutting through the legendary Gordian knot. He swings a sword through a massive tangled rope labeled with the many complex problems his administration has been confronting. Surrounding him are figures depicted as Roman soldiers and senators, all reaching toward him in alarm or opposition. The courts, Congress, the mainstream media, public polls, RINO politicians within his own party, and Democrats. This cartoon is different from most of my recent work. It's not trying to argue that Trump is right or wrong. It's trying to describe something, a particular style of governing, and the reactions that style has produced. Let me explain what I mean by the Gordian knot before I go further, because the reference matters. The story comes from the ancient Greek and Roman world. The city of Gordium in Phrygia had a famous knot tied to an ox cart, and there was a prophecy that whoever could untie it would rule all of Asia. For generations, men had tried and failed. The strands were too intricately interwoven to be unraveled. But when Alexander the Great arrived in 333 BC, he studied the knot, then drew his sword and cut it in half. He went on to conquer most of the known world before dying at 32. The Gordian knot has become shorthand throughout history for a particular kind of decision. It's the decision to bypass conventional process when conventional process appears unable to produce a solution. Leaders across centuries have invoked Alexander when they wanted to justify acting decisively rather than working through accumulated complexity. The metaphor has been used by good leaders and bad leaders alike, by reformers and tyrants, by people whose decisive action saved their nations, and by people whose decisive action destroyed them. The metaphor itself is morally neutral. Whether cutting a knot is wisdom or hubris depends entirely on whether the strands needed to be untangled or whether they were merely obstacles to be removed. This is what my cartoon is engaging with. President Trump has approached his second term with a distinctive style, taking decisive action on a wide range of complex problems that previous administrations approached more cautiously. His supporters see this as the bold leadership the country needs after decades of incrementalism and inaction. His critics see it as reckless action that bypasses the institutional checks designed to ensure decisions are wise. Both views are present in the cartoon. The MAGA helmeted Alexander figure is heroic from one angle and alarming from another, depending on the viewer. Let me describe what each of the surrounding figures represents, because the cartoon depicts a complete political landscape rather than just one perspective. The courts represent the legal system, which has issued multiple rulings limiting or attempting to limit administration actions. Some of these rulings have been upheld, others have been reversed. The administration has been blocked by lower courts and vindicated by higher courts on various issues. Whether the courts are operating as legitimate checks on executive overreach or as partisan obstruction depends on which decisions you're focused on and which philosophical commitments you bring to a constitutional interpretation. Congress represents the legislative branch, which has been internally divided about the administration's approach. Republican majorities have been narrow, requiring near unanimous party discipline on contested votes. Some legislative initiatives have passed, others have been blocked even by Republican members. Whether Congress is fulfilling its constitutional role of deliberation or abdicating its role in the face of executive action depends on which votes you focus on. The mainstream media represents the major established news organizations, which have generally been skeptical of the administration's approach. Some of that skepticism reflects legitimate journalism documenting real concerns. Some of it reflects the genuine political orientation of major news organizations. Both characterizations have evidence supporting them, and viewers from different perspectives weigh that evidence differently. Public polls represent the broader public's reaction. Polling on most of the administration's major actions has been mixed. On some issues, the public broadly supports the administration's approach. On others, particularly the Iran war and tariff-related economic disruption, public opinion has been less favorable. Whether polls are a meaningful signal of democratic legitimacy or a measure of media-shaped opinion is itself contested. RINO politicians represent Republicans who have publicly disagreed with administration decisions. The term, often used pejoratively, captures a real phenomenon. There are Republican senators and representatives who have voted against administration priorities, criticized administration tactics, or publicly broken with administration positions on specific issues. Whether they are principled conservatives applying consistent standards or political opportunists positioning for future races depends on the individual and the issue. Democrats represent the conventional political opposition. Their opposition is the most expected and the least surprising. But the cartoon includes them in the surrounding figures because they too are part of the political environment the administration operates in, and their resistance is part of what shapes which initiatives succeed and which fail. Now, here's the editorial question this cartoon raises. When a leader cuts through a complex knot, what happens to the strands? The Gordian knot legend doesn't actually tell us. Alexander cut the knot and rode away. We don't know whether the strands were carefully gathered and used productively afterwards, or whether they fell apart and were discarded. We just know the prophecy was satisfied. The man who solved the puzzle ruled most of the known world for the rest of his short life. Real political problems are different from a rope. Cuba, Venezuela, Ukraine, China, Iran, climate change, inflation, tariffs, immigration, corruption, fraud, and DEI. These are not strands that can simply be severed and forgotten. Each of them represents real human situations, real economic relationships, real strategic interests, and real moral questions. A decisive action can change the immediate situation. Whether the underlying problem is resolved depends on what comes after the cut. This is the deepest question the cartoon raises, not whether bold action is good or bad in the abstract, but whether the specific bold actions of this administration are addressing problems or merely transforming them into different problems. This cartoon isn't really about my specific views on these individual issues. It's about something larger. It's about a moment in American history when a leader has decided that the conventional process is itself the problem and has set about cutting through it rather than working within it. That's a profound decision with profound consequences. The cartoon depicts that decision being made and the reactions to it, without telling viewers what to conclude about it. Looking at this scene, as I imagine future historians might, I think what's being depicted is genuinely consequential. The pattern of governance the cartoon shows, bold executive action confronting institutional resistance from courts, Congress, media, polls, and inter-party critics, and the opposition party, is the political reality of this moment. How it resolves will shape American institutions for generations. What do you think? Is the Trump administration the Alexander the country needed, cutting through accumulated complexity that previous administrations could not resolve? Or is it the Alexander the founders feared, treating constitutional constraints as obstacles to be overcome? Let me know in the comments. If you found this interesting, I would appreciate you subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and even sharing it with friends. Thanks for listening.